Back on the rally, Tyler Jacobs and Michael Beller of Sports Illustrated. This is another edition of Beller's Bracketology this evening right here on the rally. Beller, let's take a look at some teams from big conferences, big-name schools that are on the bubble and have something to play for the final week of the season in their conference tournament.
Yeah, we've got a lot of these teams going into conference tournament play for these power conferences because with the A-10 down, with the American down, with the Missouri Valley Conference maybe only getting one team in, a conference we've seen get multiple bids over the last few years. You're going to see a lot of these power conference teams that were middling in conference play, went about 500, get in. One I want to talk about right now, the Syracuse Orange. This is a team that had a lot of good wins, really three that stand out in the regular season. But the problem for Syracuse is that they did all their damage at home. And we know that the selection committee wants to see an ability from any team, even teams at the back end of the bubble, go on the road, beat tournament quality competition. And Syracuse, quite frankly, didn't do that. All their good wins came in the Carrier Dome, and that's going to be something that they're going to have to rectify this week with the ACC tournament in Brooklyn. Their first game of that tournament comes against Miami. Miami certainly locked in as a tournament team. I really think that Syracuse's tournament fate could be determined in that game.
Okay.
Another team in their conference, Georgia Tech. This is a team that we have to talk about again. Tyler talked about them every single time we've gotten together. Three big wins. You know them by now. North Carolina, Florida State, Notre Dame. But again, a team that got a lot of losses during conference play. And what that means is that there really isn't a lot of margin for error for Georgia Tech. They lost to Syracuse over the weekend. I told you going into the weekend that maybe that's going to be a de facto elimination game, and that still could be the case for Georgia Tech. But the ACC is going to afford them a lot of opportunities to build that resume even further in the conference tournament. If they do end up getting a couple more resume builders added to what they did in the regular season, might be hard to keep them out, even though they will have taken a 15th loss. That would make them the first ever team to get an at-large bid with 15 losses. They have an opportunity, but I think they need two good wins in the conference tournament to get there.
And Wake Forest, a team in the ACC as well, that's kind of been a little bit of a diametrically opposed version of Georgia Tech. They look great by all metrics, and they struggled to find those signature wins.
They did, but this last week of the regular season, Tyler, we see one of the highlights here. They go to Virginia Tech over the weekend, get a win there against a team that is definitely going dancing. Before this, at home, they beat a Louisville team that could end up as a number one seed. That was a crucial week for the Demon Deacons. They did exactly what they needed to do. One great win, one very good win on the road. I think they're in a position where if they just avoid a bad loss, they just don't lose to one of the bottom teams in this conference, they're good. They're getting in. They've done enough. As you said, the metrics, the RPI, the Ken Pom rating, great for Wake Forest, better than Georgia Tech, better than Syracuse. Those two teams might have more great wins than they do, but Wake Forest didn't have any bad losses. Can't say that about Syracuse, can't say that about Georgia Tech. They get the wins over Louisville and Virginia Tech last week. I think that's going to get them in. They just can't stumble in the ACC tournament.
Nothing wrong with the ACC. We know how deep and good that conference is. The Big Ten, however, has been a little down this year, and there are four teams that are usually dancing around this time of the year, or at least know they're going to be dancing: Michigan State, Illinois, Indiana, and Iowa. Why do they find themselves on the bubble, and who amongst this quartet do you think has the best chance of getting in?
I think Michigan State has the best chance of getting in, and just like we talked about with Wake Forest, it's going to take a lot, I think, to keep Michigan State out of the tournament. They did enough. There was sort of uneven in the non-conference, and then they got a slow start in the Big Ten tournament, or in the Big Ten conference portion of their season. But they did enough in the conference. This is a team that beat Minnesota twice. They beat Northwestern, and they didn't really have any terrible losses that stand out on their resume. So again, just no bad losses. Don't lose to Rutgers. Don't suffer a bad loss in the Big Ten tournament. And I think Michigan State is going to be safe. Right now, I think they're the only one of these four that are going to get into the dance. If I had to pick one other one that could jump in, it's the Iowa Hawkeyes. And this is a team we weren't even talking about a couple of weeks ago. But over the last few weeks, they beat Maryland on the road. They beat Wisconsin on the road. And you go back to what they did early in conference season. They beat Purdue. They beat Michigan. They've really played their way onto the bubble. I think they still have some work to do in the Big Ten tournament, but they're the one team that's worth watching out of this group. Michigan State safe, Iowa intriguing, Indiana, Illinois. I think it's going to be a longer shot for both of those teams. And Indiana probably needs to win the Big Ten tournament to get in.
And the SEC obviously is dominated by Kentucky. Florida and South Carolina have been a couple of good teams, but Ole Miss, Bama, and Georgia on the bubble as well amongst that trio there in the SEC. Anyone have a legit claim to a tournament invitation?
Mississippi's probably the one that can really do it just because they didn't have that many bad losses during the regular season. Really not that many losses. Now, they benefited from playing a weaker schedule than you're going to see on average in the SEC. They only played Kentucky and Florida once apiece. Not the case for Georgia. Had to play both of those teams twice. We're so close in all 4 of those games, but they didn't get over the hump.
Right.
And that means that basically Georgia has proved to us that they can't hang. They can hang with tournament quality competition, but they can't quite get over the hump. Mississippi hasn't done that yet. I do think all 3 of these teams are going to be out.
Okay.
This slide, the one that really is interesting is USC. Same thing as Wake Forest and Michigan State. USC, no bad losses, and you're in. Great wins. UCLA, they beat SMU as well. So those are 2 really nice wins for USC. No terrible losses. Just don't get any bad ones in the Pac-12 tournament. They're going to be dancing as well. These SEC teams really going to have to make a deep run, probably 2 big wins at least for all 3 of them, if they can even have any hope on Selection Sunday.
All right, well, now it is conference tournament time, and it should be fun, not only for the teams we know are dancing, but, of course, for the teams that are on the bubble, big schools from Power 5 conferences that need to do some damage to maybe bolster their tournament resume for March. If you missed any of our Beller's Bracketology throughout the evening here on The Rally, make sure you search that term on your favorite 120 platform. You'll find those conversations waiting for you on demand.